The voice among the stars. Lina Carter had always heard the stars, not in the way astronomers listened with massive radio dishes, nor in the way poets imagined them whispering ancient secrets. It was something else, something deeper. A rhythm, a pulse, like the heartbeat of the universe itself. But no one ever believed her. At 14, she was the youngest resident of Station Eos, an orbital research facility near Saturn. Her mother, Dr. Evelyn Carter, was one of Earth's foremost astrophysicists, studying deep space anomalies. Lina was supposed to be asleep when the Celestials arrived. They didn't come in ships. They didn't announce themselves with flashing lights or cryptic messages. They simply spoke. A signal, impossibly vast and complex, flooded every communication channel across the system. Scientists scrambled to decipher it, but no known language matched the patterns. It wasn't sound, not exactly. It was something deeper, resonating at a level that bypassed technology and struck at the very core of human consciousness. Then the message became clear. You are insignificant. This world is unworthy. Judgment will conclude in 15 minutes. Panic erupted across every human colony. Military fleets mobilized. Diplomats sent frantic transmissions. And yet, nothing. The Celestials did not respond. They had already made their decision. Lina felt it in her bones, the way the signal pressed against her mind like an unspoken demand. And then, to her horror, she understood. It wasn't just a message. It was a test, and humanity was failing. In the observation deck of Station Eos, Lina sat alone, staring at the endless void beyond Saturn's rings. Below, the scientists argued, the military shouted, and her mother pleaded with Earth Command for more time. But they didn't have time. Lina took a slow breath, then closed her eyes. The stars pulsed. It wasn't words, not really, but something older than speech, a frequency, a cadence, a song. And she knew the melody. She didn't know how, but she did. Somewhere, deep in her memory, in the lullabies her mother used to hum when she was little, in the forgotten echoes of human history. It was there. Without thinking, Lina hummed back. The station's lights flickered. The arguing voices below fell silent as the entire facility shuddered. And then, for the first time since the Celestials had spoken, they responded. A vibration, so deep it seemed to hum in her bones, resonated through the station. The Celestials were no longer speaking to the world. They were speaking to her. The words weren't like before. They weren't declarations or threats. They were questions. You know the old song? Lina swallowed, her heart pounding. She had no idea what the old song was, only that it was woven into her very being. Somehow, across the vastness of time, humanity had carried a fragment of something forgotten. Yes, she whispered. A pause. The station trembled again. Then a new message. Prove humanity's worth. Speak. Lina's breath hitched. She wasn't a scientist. She wasn't a soldier. She was just a girl who listened to the stars. But no one else had been given this chance. She had 14 minutes left, and she had to save the world. The trial of memory. The station was silent. Every scientist, every officer, every person listening across the system held their breath as the Celestials waited. Their demand echoed in Lina's mind like a force beyond sound. Prove humanity's worth. Speak. Her hands trembled. She wasn't a diplomat. She wasn't a leader. But they had spoken to her. She had no choice but to answer. Lina closed her eyes and took a slow breath. Humans, we aren't perfect, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We make mistakes. We fail. But we learn. We grow. The Celestials did not reply in words. Instead, the station shook, and suddenly, she was falling. Lina landed on stone streets, her vision swimming. The scent of smoke and blood filled the air. Shouts echoed in a language she didn't understand. She turned and gasped. She stood in the middle of a burning city. The Celestials had pulled her into a memory, but not hers. Humanity's. Soldiers rushed past, metal armor clanking. Scrolls and books were tossed into the fire as robed scholars begged for mercy. The Library of Alexandria. Lina's breath caught. She knew this place. It was one of the greatest losses of knowledge in human history. A celestial voice, vast and emotionless, pressed into her mind. You destroy what you create. Lina clenched her fists. Yes, she admitted. We have, but we rebuild. The fire roared higher, swallowing the library whole. And suddenly, the flames vanished. She was somewhere else now. The sky was black, torn apart by blinding white light. The ground trembled beneath her feet. A mushroom cloud rose into the sky, turning day into night. Hiroshima. The weight of it crushed her, pressing in her chest like she was being buried alive. Screams filled her ears. A child cried for a mother who would never answer. She fell to her knees, shaking. The Celestial's voice came again. You slaughter your own kind. Tears burned her eyes. Yes, she whispered. But we remember. Images flashed. Hospitals built, treaties signed, hand once clenched in fists now reaching for peace. We aren't just destruction. We heal. The ruins of Hiroshima blurred, and she was pulled again. Now, she stood beneath a steel sky. Towers of metal stretched toward the heavens. Dust and smoke filled the air. She recognized it instantly. The ruins of Earth's first failed colony. A voice cold and distant. You are weak. You fail. Lina gritted her teeth. Yes, but we keep going. She turned, pointing to the horizon, where, just beyond the ruins, a new city stood. Bright, thriving, built on the ashes of the old. The Celestials were silent. The station came back into focus. Lina collapsed to the floor, gasping. Her body ached like she had truly been in those places, felt their weight. The Celestials had shown her humanity's failures, but they hadn't expected her answer. We don't just fall. We rise. The lights flickered. Then, time remaining, 8 minutes. Lina's heart pounded. They weren't convinced yet, and the next trial was about to begin. The trial of creation. Lina's breath was ragged, her limbs shaking as she struggled to her feet. The Celestials had tested her with humanity's failures, forcing her to witness the worst moments of history. Now, the voice pressed into her mind again, vast and emotionless. The second trial begins. The station around her shimmered, and then it was gone. Lina blinked. She was no longer on Io station. She stood in a vast, empty void, and before her, a great hand of light reached forward, fingers shifting and pulsing like a living star. Then suddenly, the hand closed into a fist, and in an instant, entire galaxies collapsed into nothing. A voice rumbled through her bones. You are consumers, destroyers. You take from a universe, but what have you given back? Lina swallowed hard. She could feel what they were showing her. The countless species that had once reached for the stars, only to fade into oblivion. Civilizations that consumed, warred, and vanished. The Celestials saw humanity as no different. They believed humanity had created nothing of value. Lina clenched her fists. That's not true, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. We don't just consume. We create. The Celestials did not respond, but the space around her shifted, and she was somewhere else again. The streets of a long-gone city stretched around her. The sky was clear, the air rich with the scent of fresh ink and parchment. People moved through narrow alleyways, gathering in open squares. She recognized the city. Florence, the Renaissance. Before her, a man bent over a canvas, carefully stroking a brush across its surface. Another chiseled marble into a shape that would become Michelangelo's David. Music drifted from a nearby courtyard, soft and haunting. Art, science, creation. Lina's chest swelled. This is what we are, she whispered. The Celestial's voice rumbled. Ephemeral, fleeting, dust in time. The city vanished, crumbling into dust. Now she was in a cold, dark room, the walls lined with chalkboards covered in equations. A man sat at a desk, scribbling furiously. His hair was wild, his hands smudged with ink. Lina recognized his face immediately. Albert Einstein. She turned, and suddenly the scene shifted. Scientists in white lab coats stood in a bright, sterile room, adjusting controls on a massive telescope. A child in a small workshop carefully pieced together a machine from scraps. A doctor in a war-torn country pressed their hands over a wounded man's chest, fighting to keep him alive. Discovery, ingenuity, progress. This is what we are, Lina said again, stronger this time. The Celestials remained silent. And then, for the final time, the world shifted. Lina was standing in a small bedroom. The walls were covered in drawings, childish and imperfect, spaceships, dragons, sprawling cities. A little girl sat cross-legged on the floor, carefully writing words into a notebook. Lina felt her breath hitch. It was her. She watched as her younger self hummed softly, tapping her pencil against the page. The melody was simple but beautiful, one her mother had hummed to her when she was younger. Then the room shook. The walls melted away, replaced by a vast, endless field of stars. And through that endless void, the hum continued, soft but growing louder. Lina suddenly understood. She had heard this melody all her life, not just from her mother, not just in her own mind. It was the same frequency the Celestials had spoken in. Her heart pounded. This melody, this song, was old. Older than humanity. Older than Earth itself. It was something that had been carried unconsciously through time. A thread woven into humanity's very existence. Lina swallowed hard. She sang. The notes were shaky at first, but as she let go, the melody filled the void, resonating in perfect harmony with the stars. And for the first time, the Celestials paused. She felt it. A shift, a hesitation. And then, at last, they spoke again. You remember the old song. Lina's pulse pounded in her ears. I don't know how, she admitted, but it's part of us. The Celestials were silent for a long, long moment. Then, time remaining for minutes, the world snapped back into focus. Lina was standing on the station once more, gasping for breath. The Celestials had not judged her yet, but she had reached them. And now, she had to finish what she had started. The final trial, the future. Lina staggered as the station came back into focus. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. For minutes left, the Celestials had listened to her. They had acknowledged the old song, but they had not yet judged humanity worthy. Their final words rang in her mind, vast and unshakable. The last trial begins. A low hum vibrated through the station. Lina braced herself, knowing what was coming, and then she was somewhere else again. She stood at the edge of a barren world. The sky was dark, filled with dying stars. The ground beneath her feet was cracked and lifeless. Ruins of once great cities lay scattered across the land, their broken towers reaching toward nothing. It was a graveyard, a world that had once thrived, now abandoned. A voice, deep as eternity, filled the air. All things end. All things fade. What future does your kind seek? Lina turned slowly, staring at the endless desolation. This was what the Celestials saw when they looked at the universe. Endless cycles of rise and fall. Species that built, expanded, and then vanished, leaving nothing behind but dust. They believed humanity was no different. That Earth, too, would crumble and be forgotten. Lina clenched her fists. You think we're just another dying race, she said, her voice steady, that will burn bright and disappear like all the others. The Celestials did not deny it. She took a step forward. You show me the past, she continued. Our failures, our destruction, our mistakes. And yes, we've fallen. We've fallen so many times. She looked up, meeting the unseen presence that surrounded her. But that's not where the story ends. The air shimmered, and suddenly, the wasteland changed. She stood in a lush green valley, filled with towering cities of glass and steel. Above, massive starships moved through the sky, leaving trails of golden light. People walked through open streets, hands outstretched in greeting. Humanity, stronger than before, wiser than before, had built something greater. This is who we are, Lina said, turning in awe. Not just destroyers, not just makers. We're dreamers. We reach for the impossible. We change. The Celestials remained silent. The scene shifted again. Lina found herself in deep space, staring at a ship unlike any she had ever seen. It was human-made, yet far beyond anything that currently existed. It sailed between distant stars, its engines glowing with a light she couldn't comprehend. And then, beyond it, another ship. Not human, not celestial. Something new, something undiscovered. A new species. A first contact that had yet to happen. Lina's breath caught. "We don't just live and die," she whispered. "We expand. We explore. We learn. We don't stop at what's in front of us. We look to what's beyond." She turned, her voice firm. "That's the future we seek." Silence. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Then at last the celestial spoke. "You are different." Lina felt a tremor beneath her feet, a shift in the very fabric of reality. "You are not the first to claim greatness. Many have tried. Many have failed. But you," a long pause, "you're something else." The station reappeared around her. Lina gasped as she was pulled back in her body. Her knees buckled, but she caught herself against the control panel. The room was silent. Every scientist, every officer, every person listening across the system sat frozen, waiting. And then the Celestial spoke one final time. "Judgment is rendered." The air trembled. "Humanity will endure." Lina's chest tightened. Relief flooded through her, so overwhelming she could barely breathe. She had done it. They had listened. She collapsed to the floor, shaking. The celestial presence faded, their vast consciousness withdrawing into the depths of space. The countdown that had once loomed over Earth vanished. The universe was silent once more. And then, cheers erupted across the station, across the solar system, across Earth itself. Lina Carter, the girl who had spoken to celestials, had saved humanity. In the days that followed, the world would struggle to understand what had happened. Scientists would analyze the signal, governments would rewrite their policies, and philosophers would debate the meaning of it all. But one truth remained. Humanity had been judged. And, for the first time in the history of the cosmos, the Celestials had found a species worth saving. Lina stood at the window of the station, staring out at the endless stars. She had spoken to them, and now she wondered, if the Celestials had listened, what other wonders were waiting to hear?